Hey, what's up everyone? I've been meaning to do this video for a while now. It's been a while since I've done any type of top anything or ranking review. So regardless, today I'm going to be ranking my least favorite to favorite Marvel Studios films. And these are just my opinions. I'm not flat out saying that certain movies are trash, certain movies are perfect with no flaws, because it's just my opinion. So here it is, all 23 movies. My first group of films, my least favorite on this list, are going to be categorized in the meh group. Starting from my least favorite, number 23, Thor: The Dark World. Now, this movie, I recently did rewatch it because I wanted to see if I saw this movie in a different light after Avengers Endgame. And honestly, that's the only reason why I would rewatch this film, because Natalie Portman's character was trash in this film. She was introduced to Chris O'Dowd's character, and he was kind of pointless too. There was so much unnecessary comedy. We got Stellan Skarsgård walking around naked in his underwear, although he did have a little bit of a tease of the multiverse all the way back in that movie, so I guess this movie is a teeny tiny bit relevant. But the villain was trash. Christopher Eccleston, I loved him as the Doctor in Doctor Who, but he just didn't do a good job in this movie either. So all around, this was my least favorite out of all 23 MCU films. Number 22, we have another Thor film, Thor Ragnarok. Now, I know this will surprise some of you, but I just wasn't a fan of Taika Waititi's interpretation of the character from the start of the film. Thor is just treated like a joke. There's a lot of serious moments in this film that are just ruined by poorly timed comedy. And that's something I've noticed with Marvel Studios in the past few years. Not so much the first phase of this series, this saga, but it's been in recent years, so I don't know if Taika Waititi's fully to blame, but I just can't get behind the fact that Thor is just this comedic character, and every single other character in this movie, Jeff Goldblum, the Hulk, and all these other characters, including Valkyrie. Valkyrie is a joke of a character, and she's making dumb one-liners like a minute after the scene with Odin's death. I mean, come on, seriously? Like, no point for the fans, for the viewers, to grieve at all. I mean, I did laugh a few times in the film, but there's a time and a place for everything. Seeing that Thor-Hulk arena fight was freaking awesome. I was totally stoked for that just from the trailer, and that fully delivered. But even, come on, Thor losing his eye just like his dad. And Hela was another throwaway villain. She wasn't important to me. I didn't care about that arc at all. So that's why this is second from last, number 22, Thor Ragnarok. So the next movie in my meh category is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, coming in at number 21. This film, I was excited for. I loved the first Guardians of the Galaxy, but just like Thor Ragnarok, they didn't know how to do the comedy in this one. I mean, Dave Bautista's character was a freaking joke the entire film. The first Guardians of the Galaxy, you had a seriousness to his character, and the one-liners he sold a lot better. Like, he was really serious, but that was just his character that came off as funny, because the seriousness of his character compared to the other characters, like, oh, sorry, Drax, that joke went over your head. Nothing goes over my head. I will kill. Like, stuff like that is hilarious, but this one he's just talking about, like, how he has big turds or something like that. What? The villain Ego in this movie, Peter Quill's dad, I mean, he was, like, somewhat interesting in the tiniest bit, but, I mean, he was better than Malekith or Hela, but I just don't know. I wasn't really sold on his backstory. It didn't interest me too much. He definitely had screen time, but the last fight with him and Peter Quill, it was just some CGI cluster of shit flying around the screen, and half the time you couldn't really see what was going on. I've seen a lot of superhero movies do this, and it happens in this movie. It's just the whole mess of CGI on the screen at once, and it just kind of just takes you out of it, takes the audience out of that specific scene, and we don't feel as emotionally invested in the characters anymore. So Guardians of the Galaxy 2 is number 21. The things I did like, I liked the introduction of Mantis. I liked her character. Peter Quill's one-liners were great. Stallone, and learning about the rest of the older Guardians was cool, but it's still in my Mac category. So the last one in this category, number 20, is Avengers Age of Ultron. This movie, oh my god. After seeing the hype that was Avengers, the first film, Avengers Assemble, Marvel's The Avengers, whatever you want to call it, the bar was set high. And this movie, sort of like the midpoint, didn't really deliver on what we expected. Some of the characters, the evolution of them was cool. We saw some side characters introduced. We had Peter Maximoff, Quicksilver, who, I mean, was an okay version, but we're already spoiled with the Fox version of Quicksilver. And the Marvel Studios version, we didn't really have time to care about them before they just killed them off. Claw was introduced in this film. He was sort of cool for the minute he was on screen, and then later brought in the Black Panther, so I guess that's what that was set up for. That's another thing. This movie was trying to set up a lot of different storylines for these characters, and it sort of got a little bit overloaded. And what the hell was up with that Black Widow and Hulk romance? Really? That was the most awkward thing I've seen on screen by Marvel Studios to date. The first third of the film, when they were introducing Ultron, was cool enough, but by the end of the film, he just felt like a cookie-cutter bad guy, just releasing his horde of minions, and then they have to fight the final boss at the end, and then humanity is restored. So that's why this movie is where it is on my list at number 20. So my next group of films, these movies were mediocre. They were good, but they definitely had some flaws. Coming in at number 19, we have Captain Marvel. Now, I didn't mind this film. Some people were bashing it, calling it feminist. I mean, people really don't understand what feminist means. Well, at least I don't think they do. All about equality, but I'm not going to get into that. No politics on this channel. Captain Marvel was fun for the most part. It was cool to see a de-aged Nick Fury and Coulson. Come on, guys. We got Agent Coulson back on the big screen for the first time in years. But Captain Marvel's backstory was predictable as hell. Even from the trailers, we kind of got a hint of who was going to be the bad guy and what's going to really happen. Some of the supporting characters introduced were cool enough, but we didn't get enough with those characters to really care about them. And Jude Law's villain was bland, let's just face it. And are you serious? Nick Fury losing his eye to some stupid little cat alien monster thing, Goose? I mean, that was the dumbest thing with this whole entire movie. The Skrulls were cool though. I enjoyed that. Again, I still thought the film was cool. I enjoyed the Skrulls, the action scenes were fun, and most of the music was fun too. Overall, it was a huge 90s nostalgia fest, and I enjoyed it for what it was. Number 18 on my list, we have Ant-Man and the Wasp. Now, this movie didn't really have Edgar Wright's fingerprint on it at all. Marvel Studios was strictly working on this, and it was their film. He didn't have any say at all. So, it really showed when this movie came out. I mean, the comedy is definitely there. Whether the comedy is poorly timed or not is up for debate, but I think there's a few moments where it's really poorly timed. The character of Ghost, her origin story was kind of cool, but then again, they ruined it with a poorly timed comedic moment. Like, I was starting to care about this character a little bit, and you guys ruined it. Walter Goggins' character, I mean, he was okay. He did what he needed to do, but he wasn't that interesting to me. I loved seeing Ant-Man, and when he was Giant Man, and the Wasp team up for certain scenes. The OG crew from the first film is back and better than ever. Louise still has his cool recap story in this one. And all in all, this probably has one of the biggest cliffhanger end credits I've seen in a while. Number 17, we have Iron Man 3. This film, first of all, I just want to say, I loved Brian Tyler's score, that because how many MCU films can you say you know the themes for? I mean, there's only really like 3 or 4 iconic themes in all 23 movies. That's saying something. What I really loved about this film, and what a lot of people don't get about this film, is this is purely a Tony Stark film. This is post-Avengers, where he's dealing with the traumatic stress that he almost died. He almost got stuck in space. So he has this sort of PTSD. And that was really intriguing. I wish more MCU films would actually focus more on the character at heart than the hero sometimes. Because after all these movies you've seen with these superheroes, you want to see how they are as a character too. And Iron Man 3 introduced us to Harley Keener. I mean, this little boy that was basically the Peter Parker to Tony Stark before Peter Parker came along. He saw this kid as a son, and he left him with all these crazy gadgets, and sure enough, he came back in Avengers Endgame during Tony Stark's funeral scene. So I'm wondering if Harley is going to be the next Iron Man down the line. I guess anything's possible. The Mandarin I actually liked for the first 2/3 of this film. I mean, he didn't have the 10 rings or anything like that, which I can understand because they were setting up the whole Thanos Infinity Stone thing, so it just kind of would have seemed like another iteration of that. But they killed it for me at the end. He was just an actor portraying someone called the Mandarin, but they did have that Marvel one-shot, that All Hail the King or Hail to the King or whatever, that kind of fixed that. So maybe that's the Mandarin they're setting up for in Shang-Chi. I guess we'll see. And Aldrich Killian doing the whole extremist thing, that just didn't work for me either. It felt a little weird. It's sort of odd to see that every single Iron Man villain, for the most part, kind of idolized Tony Stark, and at some point, the Starks in history screwed them over. So they come back years later to get their revenge. Iron Man 101 villain, right? Overall, it's still a good film. I don't hate it like some people do, and it's still watchable to me, but that's why it's number 17. Number 16, another Iron Man film, Iron Man 2. So, like I was saying before, this character, Whiplash, idolized Tony Stark, Howard Stark, whichever one, and they screwed his family over, so he comes back years later to get his revenge. And for the most part, this movie was cool. I mean, I like Justin Hammer, I like Tony Stark and War Machine. I enjoyed the little arguments Rhodey and Tony Stark would have with one another. Besides his origin and the final fight, I actually like the character of Whiplash. I like the technology. It just looked cool to me. The fight choreography with him was great. The new suit they had in Iron Man 2, the whole briefcase suit where he just puts it on and goes across his arms, that was cool to see. Overall, it's in this category for a reason. It's a good film with flaws. So coming in at number 15 is Spider-Man Far From Home. And this film, if you haven't seen it yet, spoilers, but it's been out for a month. Come on now. Quentin Beck, Mysterio, was a character who was revealed to have idolized Tony Stark. Years later, Tony Stark screws him over in his opinion, and he's back to exact his revenge on someone else now. This movie is higher up in my good but with flaws category because it has a lot of good things in it. The new suits are awesome. That one scene we get with Peter Parker and Happy on the plane where Peter just shows all of his emotion. It just pours out how he feels about Tony Stark. We get a real moment from Spider-Man, and that's something rare we see with his character. I love the romance between Zendaya and Peter Parker, and even the effects, the technology that Mysterio used was cool. It was straight out of Spider-Man video games, and it was a treat to see it on the big screen. I'm still not impressed with this PC version Marvel Studios is giving us with Flash Thompson. I just don't like his character at all. But one last thing. Can we talk about that second end credit scene with Sony's version of J. Jonah Jameson? I mean, it might not be that universe's version, but it's the same actor. Come on now. And the tease at the end when they reveal that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. Holy crap, like, what's going to happen next? Because Spider-Man ain't in Phase 4 of the MCU. Number 14, we have Ant-Man. This movie was a treat when I first saw it. I mean, you have Ant-Man's crew and Ant-Man himself, Scott Lang, and Hank Pym, who used to be Ant-Man way back in the day. All these characters are really cool. It's the first time we're seeing a superhero heist type film. We hadn't really seen any shrink and expand type effects like this in movies before. I mean, maybe years ago and poorly done because effects were limited back then. But Edgar Wright did an amazing job with this film. Even though he lost it 2/3 of the way through production, you definitely saw his handprint on this movie. The villain is why I say this film has flaws, because it's just another character. He wanted to use Hank Pym's technology to do something different and use it for evil. It's not that compelling of an origin story for a villain. Yellow Jacket was very bland and very forgettable, but overall, this movie was entertaining as hell. It was funny. It had its flaws, but that's why it's number 14 on my list. Number 13 on my good but with flaws list, we have Doctor Strange. So when I heard about this, I was hyped because Doctor Strange deals with bending of reality, different universes, time travel. So they delivered on some of that with this film. The whole setup was great. The origin story felt very different from past origin stories we've seen for the MCU. Benedict Wong was great. Benedict Cumberbatch was great. Tilda Swinton did a good job as well. But Mads Mikkelsen as the villain, again, just like Ant-Man, kind of killed it for me. His character wasn't anything special. He was very bland. Basically a student of this order of sorcerers that Doctor Strange was in that kind of defected. And it was just boring, guys. The special effects were the best part of this film, though. All this reality bending and Inception type shit was so nuts to see. And the whole time travel aspect, reversing time, Dormammu, going to see that part, was all top notch. Number 12 on my list, we're basically halfway there, goes to the first Thor film. So this movie, when it came out, was cool. We had never really seen a Marvel Studios property based on something else before at this time. This is based on the old Norse tale of the mighty Thor. The first scene when the film opens up, they're in Asgard, then they go to the Frost Giants, and that first moment when Thor throws the hammer and it comes back, it's like, holy crap, how badass would that be to have a weapon like that in real life? The Warriors 3 were badass as well, and this was the first film for me that had the perfect balance of action, fun, comedy, all rolled up into one film. The villain was a little bit weak, but it was just the Destroyer. I feel like this is the one MCU film that didn't need a strong villain for it to thrive. I honestly wish Jeremy Renner, even though I'm not a big Hawkeye fan, I wish his character had a little bit more to do in this, because he was in there for, like, when I say a cameo, I mean a cameo. A whole, like, 10 seconds he was in this film. And let's just face it, Loki was one of the best parts about this film. All of his trickery and mischief he's causing, his character was fun from start to finish, whether he was good or evil. Number 11, the last one on my good but with flaws list. It was almost great but with a few minor flaws. Guardians of the Galaxy, the first film. So this movie was very different and took a human character and put him into this cosmic universe. Peter Quill, Gamora, Rocket Raccoon. I mean, this movie, the concept is goofy as hell. We have a freaking talking tree, and somehow Marvel Studios pulled it off. The characters were great. The soundtrack was great. The CGI, special effects, and the wonder of all these other worlds, realms, and planets were really neat to see. But unfortunately, we had the setup of Thanos. Now, Thanos is a huge villain. They're building up to him. So they teased Thanos a little bit in this film, and then we had Ronan, the Accuser. Now, he was featured in Captain Marvel as well, and he was just a throwaway character in that, and he's just a throwaway villain in this too. I feel like they don't really know how to treat that character, and his villain was just very uninspiring, because we know there's a bigger threat to get to eventually. So that's what really killed this movie for me. It's still a good film, it's entertaining, and it has one of the best soundtracks out of all the MCU films to date, which is why it's almost a great film, but it's still good with flaws, and at number 11. So my next category, great films with a few minor gripes. Number 10, Captain America, the First Avenger. This film was cool because we got to see just a normal run-of-the-mill guy. He was skinny, but he had so much determination. We got to see him go into the super soldier program, just how that changed him. It was a little wonky back in the day, though, seeing Chris Evans' face miniaturized, like skinnified, that's not even a word, but put on that smaller dude's body. When he got buff, I was like, well, yeah, that makes sense. That's him now. But still, it's just totally jarring. I love Tommy Lee Jones. Seeing Haley Atwell for the first time as Agent Carter, her character is fantastic. Even Red Skull. I mean, Red Skull is inspired by a lot of Nazi characters from that era. I mean, he's basically like a super villain Hitler. And even though he wasn't the most iconic villain in the MCU, he still had significance. Even when I saw that film for the first time and he vanished down a thin air at the end, I'm like, he's not dead. He's coming back later. Cue Avengers Infinity War. And I also like when movies do period pieces. This one was set in World War II. Captain Marvel set in the 90s. I like when stuff does that. Number 9, another Captain America film. Captain America Civil War. Now this movie, like I said, it's in this category for a reason. Great, but with a few flaws. All of these characters coming together for one specific fight at the end of the movie in that airport was crazy. I mean, we get introduced to Peter Parker's Spider-Man, and he seemed a little goofy, but the new take on his character was cool. But holy crap, that twist we got with the Winter Soldier and Tony Stark's parents, like, who saw that twist coming? No one. That has to be one of the top moments in Marvel Cinematic history that you just felt so much emotion. And we also got introduced to Black Panther. The little bit of origin story they gave us in that movie, I was like, you know what? I'd like to see his own film. And we got it. But I sound like a broken record here. The villain, yes, there was a villain. I wouldn't really have minded if it was just the General Ross character that kind of split them up in this movie. But no, we had, what was it, Baron Zemo's character was technically speaking the villain. He was the one in charge of everything, and he was forgettable. I almost forgot his name. I almost had to look it up. Again, that's why this movie's number 9 on my list. It's a great movie with some flaws. It's definitely worth rewatching. If it's on TV, I'm always going to rewatch it. And these movies are just fun. So any movie in this category, I'm definitely going to check out again. Number 8, we come to one of the more forgotten films in the MCU, The Incredible Hulk. Now, I wasn't too much of a fan of Eric Bana's Hulk. I mean, back in the day when it first came out, I was a little kid. I mean, I enjoyed the hell out of it because I was dumb and a kid and wasn't spoiled like I am nowadays. But Edward Norton, I loved his Hulk because I feel like his Hulk had a little bit of comedic relief to him, but it really blended the science knowledge of Bruce Banner and the Hulk perfectly well in that film. The Abomination was a good enough villain. I mean, we got an origin story. It was sort of compelling. Like, I saw where his character was coming from, but it wasn't the best in the world. The final fight, though, with the Hulk and Abomination, it was a CGI fight, but I could clearly see what was going on, so that fight was badass. The fight at the university was totally cool too. Hulk just going after all of those military guards and Blonsky just jumping right in and fighting him as a human. And hey, for those who don't know, the serum that Blonsky took was derived from the original Captain America serum. So it's really cool to see that aspect kind of bleed into other early movies. I'm just really sad we never got to see Edward Norton come back because Mark Ruffalo, I did enjoy you in the first Avengers film, but ever since then, the MCU has treated you like a joke, man. Number 7, Black Panther. So this film, holy crap, it deserved all the praise it got because I'm a huge fan of worlds. If you can suck me into your world, then you've already won me. And the world of Wakanda was amazing in this film. Chadwick Boseman does a great job. Michael B. Jordan and all these other astounding black actors did a fantastic job in this film. And we even get something that's a little reminiscent of Lord of the Rings. We have Martin Freeman and Andy Serkis in one room again together. We get a little Bilbo Gollum vibe going off of that, so that's cool. The soundtrack of the film was fantastic too. That just 3 notes that are played throughout the film, so we know that Black Panther has his own theme. And all the tribal music they did as well just really engulfed me in this world of Wakanda. Killmonger was a fantastic villain too. Now he wasn't perfect because he could have been in the movie a little bit more because there's a point where he's not in the movie for like 35-40 minutes, but the point of view that they show from his character is totally believable from start to finish. I'm excited to see what they do for a second film because this film set the bar really high for the character of Black Panther. I've also never seen such a big cultural phenomenon for a movie come out before, and that's just great. We need more stuff like this. Hopefully we get as much culture appreciation for Shang-Chi as we do for this film. Number 6, Spider-Man Homecoming. So Spider-Man's one of my favorite Marvel characters. Like, please do not screw this up, Marvel. We saw him tease earlier on in Captain America Civil War, and now he gets his own film. Now this is kind of like the doofy, teeny bopper version of the character, but all his powers were cool. I liked how he had the Deadpool eyes, kind of, the animated eyes. That was neat to see. The one thing I didn't really like is the whole super suit thing. I mean, Spider-Man had all of these different abilities, so I feel like he didn't really need a suit to rely on all these extra gadgets for. Instant kill mode, he had, what was it, Stark AI that was in his head. All that stuff was not needed. Just learn to hone your senses and not rely on technology. And again, like you heard from Spider-Man Far From Home, Flash Thompson was a stupid iteration of the character. I'm sorry. But one of the coolest parts of this film was Michael Keaton as the Vulture, because he was just an average Joe. He was a working guy like me and you, trying to make ends meet. And from start to finish, I totally saw the world from his point of view. Again, we fall into that category of who is screwed over by Tony Stark, the damage control group, And he even said in the movie, Tony Stark, he doesn't care about guys like us. By the end of the movie, I was almost rooting for his character. Spider-Man Homecoming definitely deserves to be where it's at on my list. That's why it's number 6. Number 5, Iron Man, the first film. The film that started it all. I guess why that's also the reason I hold it so close to my heart, because it started all for us. Tony Stark, we had the revitalization of Robert Downey's career with this film. The weak point in this movie was Ironmonger. I don't even think they ever refer to him as that in the film, but that's his name. Obadiah Stane, played by, was it Jeff Bridges? Rhodey's introduced in this film, and just to see how great of a character Tony Stark is before he's even Iron Man, how he spent a good half to 2/3 of this film in that cave, building this ghetto-ass tank of an Iron Man suit. That was the coolest part of this film for me. What Marvel did, they took a character that's not Spider-Man, it's not Captain America. This was not an obscure character, but a little less popular. And they made it one of the best characters in the MCU, if not the best. Number 4, Avengers Infinity War. This movie had me so hyped because the trailers were amazing. And if I were to rank this movie out of 10, I would give it a 9 because it's hard to find any flaws with this. But the one flaw I did find was the Incredible Hulk, Bruce Banner. Like I said, I was only really a fan of Mark Ruffalo's Hulk in the first Avengers film. This one, he's kind of like emasculated. He has performance issues. He's just riffing off lines like, "Shut up, you big green asshole." Even Lou Ferrigno said, like, "I can't take Mark Ruffalo's Hulk seriously." And that's exactly how I feel. And that's the only really aspect of this film that I didn't like. All around, seeing all these characters together and seeing the Avengers lose for once. Like, I mean, how many superhero movies out there do you see them actually lose? Like, we were shocked at the end, but we knew there was going to be a second film. You knew at the time that Guardians 3 was confirmed and the second Spider-Man film was confirmed. So when certain characters died at the end, you weren't that emotionally invested. You were just like, okay, like, they're not really dead. What I liked about this movie is even though we saw all of our favorite superheroes fighting together, not all of them were together. They were fighting in groups of superheroes fighting for the same cause, but still, Tony Stark and Captain America didn't see eye to eye. So they were both doing separate missions, and they were fighting for a higher power to be taken down. And that higher power was Thanos, the best villain in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. This guy, I understand where he's coming from. I mean, he just thinks humanity is plagued and half the population needs to be wiped. And after attending San Diego Comic-Con, how ridiculously crowded that was, I definitely understand his logic. The special effects and motion capture for Josh Brolin were excellent, and just the culmination of all these breadcrumbs and teases that we've had in past MCU films totally paid off for his character. Number 3, we have the recent Avengers Endgame. Now, this movie was great. All of the characters who didn't really get that much screen time in the first Avengers Infinity War to shined in this film. The special effects were top notch. The budget was crazy for this film. This movie was 3 hours long, and it definitely felt like a culmination and a great resolution to 10 years of story building, or however many, was it 11, 10? I don't know. However many years of story building they did. It just all paid off, guys. The Russo brothers definitely know how to do movies, and that scene where you see the hammer lift up, you see it fly back, and Captain America catches it. I've never heard a crowd cheer that loud before. And seeing it opening night was an experience because 30 to 40 times in the film we had certain moments where people would cheer for it. It was just great to feel the love of the audience, just feel so many people feeling the same thing you're feeling, just nostalgia, all around wonder that this is actually happening. All these characters are on screen together. And the final resolution, Tony Stark dies. He straight up sacrifices himself. Captain America becomes an old man after time traveling. He lived his life to the fullest. And he finally got with Peggy Carter, guys. He finally got that dance. Black Widow or Hawkeye, I didn't really care about when they decided which one would kill themselves for the Soul Stone. I was like, okay, it has to be Black Widow. Hawkeye has a family. They're not going to do him dirty like that. So I kind of knew Black Widow was going to die, so that wasn't that big of a deal to me. And again, with the Hulk, I mean, same thing with Infinity War, same thing with this one. I didn't really like the human in-between aspect of the Hulk. It was a little weird. And I understand he's not that type of scientist, but when they're doing the whole time travel thing, he's like, duh, I don't know what to do. Let me press all of these buttons. And nope. He's a baby. He's an adult and he peed himself. Like, if you were a really smart scientist and you weren't confident in your work, you would let someone else do things because you know the consequences could be disastrous. Okay, we're down to the last two. So you guys should already know what the last two are. Number 2 goes to the first team-up movie we've had, Marvel's The Avengers. This movie just has so much to love about it. Thor, Black Widow, the Hulk, Iron Man, Captain America, all these characters together for the first time on screen, well, despite a few cameos here and there, but regardless, the action scenes were fantastic, the special effects. We have the first big Marvel Studios theme, dun, 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 dun. And like, that's what makes me remember a film. The musical score, the soundtrack is what makes the movie for me. And the best part was at the end that we actually got a team-up film. We actually got to see these guys playing off one another. We see Iron Man shoot a blast, Captain America deflecting it with his shield, and Captain America leads the group. We see him working with the people of New York City as well, the police department, the fire department, and you're just completely captivated by this world, by this movie. And the villain was good too. We got Loki as the villain, even though he was a leftover, I guess you wouldn't say leftover villain from the first Thor film, but a leftover character becoming a villain. The opening sequence with Black Widow, the fight scene between Thor and Iron Man, Thor and Hulk, the part where Hulk is unleashed onto the aircraft carrier. And not to mention the final fight sequence where we get that one shot of the camera panning around all the freaking Avengers. There has not been a single moment in the entire MCU history that made me feel so much joy. Number 1 on my list, my favorite MCU film to date, goes to Captain America, The Winter Soldier. I'm a huge fan of spy films, espionage type films. James Bond is one of my favorite franchises. I've seen every single James Bond movie to date, even the ones from the 60s. This film is the film that made Captain America badass. I mean, he was cool in the first film, but still kind of dorky to me. This movie just put his character on the map. And the whole story of Sam, the Falcon, they were in some army-type PTSD group, like a recovery group, and how he met up with Steve Rogers and just started talking to him. That whole storyline was just really emotional and powerful. Seeing a character that was good in the first film, Bucky, return as a villain, and us finding out that something bigger was being planned here the entire time, the frickin' return of Hydra. No one saw that coming. That was never spoiled online. And we even get one of the S.H.I.E.L.D., well, actually Hydra agents reference Doctor Strange already. Damn. This movie was fun. It was gritty. It delivered just the right amount of humor, and the S.H.I.E.L.D. presence with Nick Fury and Natasha Romanoff was great too. I couldn't have asked for a better film, and it's probably the most viewed MCU film for me. I think I've seen it at least 20 times. 2 or 3 times in theater. I can't remember how many times on Blu-ray, and then whenever it's on TV, I always watch it. I even put it on in the background while I'm editing things. So, my favorite film, Captain America, The Winter Soldier. That's always going to be number 1 for me. I don't know how they would beat it. So what's your guys' rankings for the MCU films? Let me know in the comments, and as always, thanks for watching, guys.